Welcome back to Hard Not Life Sailing. In today's episode, we're diving into the next chapter of our fiberglass hardtop bimini build. Join us as we showcase the meticulous process of crafting the support legs that will give our bimini its strength and durability. Along the way, we'll share our experiences and insights gained during this exciting journey. Let's get started.
These are the main supports for our bimini, and I'm putting this hard base down here. I just did this side. I'll show you how I did the other side, but I embedded long bolts. They're going to go right into the coaming and filled it with fiberglass and cloth so that the heads of the bolts don't turn, so I can simply tighten them from the inside of the boat. Rough cut one of these sheets and marked it with a pen or marker. Just going to cut that off. Where she's going to sit. So I have to cut a bit of a relief out of this for the wires to get in between the two sheets. These are going to be layered up with a gap for the wires and a gap for the water lines. It's still a little tight. There it is, my first wall. Welcome back, everyone. Today we are going to work on the structural main supports of the hardtop. So this is the one I made. It's 13 inches at the bottom, 10 at the top, with a supporting arm going to the aft to support the overhang of the roof. This bottom part, I have to look up the name of it. It's very high density foam. They use it for transoms, and then divinicell. So this is like much heavier than the divinicell. And this is what's anchoring to the boat. That we're using stainless steel bolts right through the coaming to have this mechanically attached to the boat rather than just glued down. That way, if the glue ever gave way or the adhesive, the bolts are still remaining and you can always recock it without losing this whole structure. So within this side, we have the wiring for all the lights and the solar panels and the drainage for the rain collector. So that's what it looks like on the outside. And that's it up top. So here I'm going to show you how I made all that. Stay tuned. Alright, this stuff is called Kusa board. I've got my angle marked here. This one is just rough because once I set this in place, because the top is 3 inches narrower than the bottom, this angle will actually be a little bit sharper. So I can go ahead and cut that with the multi-tool, and then we'll put it in. Alright, I got that cut now. This is the full width of it. I'm going to mark here. I'm going to remove the teak on the coaming. These plugs weren't very deep. Just cut the top off with a knife. And I just broke the top off of a screw. Oh, off of both these screws. So I'm thinking this thing is pretty much not even held on here. Came off cleaner than the last one. Got one broken screw there. And there's my angle for cutting. Voila. So now my next step, drilling 2 holes here This actually slopes it ever so slightly. I'm going to follow the contour of where it's going to meet up here, and I'm going to be drilling 2 big holes in here for the bolts. We're going to sink those bolts into this, and then we're going to fill it with resin and a bit of glass to make sure that the top of those bolts don't ever turn, because we want to only tighten them from the bottom. There'll be no access to the top. Alright, we got 3/8 of 3/16 stainless steel bolts. So I'm going to drill the hole 25 64ths, which is 1/64 bigger than the bolts. So they'll fit a fairly snug fit, so I can get a bit of resin inside there and help seal them up. So what I've done is got this lined with where I want to go, in line with where it's going to connect here. These are the washers going on. I don't want the washers sticking at the sides, but I have to go as far to the outside as possible, because to go straight into here, I have to actually go on an angle. And now get a drill. In a momento. Now I'm going to go up a size to drill through the boat. So if we have to remove this top to paint it, we can lower it down and line these up a bit easier. Alright, next up here, got a spade bit 1 inch. It's a 1-inch washer. This is going to vibrate a bit, so it'll go slightly oversized. I'm expecting that. Just wanting that to be low enough, the washer and the nut, to be embedded in here. Actually, it's not going to be the nut, it's going to be the top of the bolt. So I went a little further than I needed to, but I want to set some resin down in here too. So I'm going to be putting resin in here, then dropping that washer down, and putting resin and a bit of glass over top of this so it seals it right in. Node fibers to give some strength to this thickened resin, and some silica. Alright, next up a second little batch of just resin, and I'll wet out the top of this. Working with foam, I've learned that your first layer of wetting it out, don't be chintzy, because it'll soak some in and then give you air pockets. Work out all that air, it'll be all transparent once you have all the cloth saturated. Too much resin and you're just adding weight without strength. That's where the peel ply fabric that I'm going to be putting on top comes in handy, because that absorbs any excess resin. In hindsight, I should have had more of this stuff ready before I started, but I knew it was such a small area. I'm not too worried about this resin kicking before I'm done. Put some resin on the sides just so the peel ply sticks, and it helps me round these corners over. And this is called a bubble pusher, and it works awesome with this peel ply. You just push out any air pockets and excess resin. Now just for this stubborn edge here on the back, I always put clear tape over top of my blocks because resin won't stick to the clear tape. Just going to place these here and clamp it down. That's that. That'll harden up, and then these bolts will be well anchored into this cusa board, and the nuts will be inside my combing. This is my shop room where I can easily access to put bolts on, or the nuts on. On the other side, I'll have to cut an access. No, it's no problem. It's exactly where a light is, so I'll just cut in behind a light. Let's check back with this one's hardened. All right, while that is drying, got this PVC pipe here. It's 3/4 ID, so inside diameter. Got a 1 1/8 pole saw. This is where that beam's gonna go, and this is the middle. I want to get my water line a little closer to the edge. So I'm actually going to drill in on an angle and feed that water line out. And then we're just going to heat that pipe up and bend it to fit inside the water line. I start my bit in here. So this is only 2-ply of a lightweight cloth. I can't remember what the weight was. Maybe 5 ounces or 8 ounces or something. But then this is where the hard top gets thicker. And now we see light, so I stop. I stop because I want to finish it now with a larger bit so I can get a layer of resin around this. I'm getting my arbor with a larger center hole. I'm gonna glue this in place like this first, and then I'm gonna heat it up and bend it. If I heat it up now, it's just gonna bend. But if I glue it in place first, then I can bend it directly into place and drop it right over top of where I want to be, which is actually back here. So all I did is prop this up with a little piece of PVC so I get just the right angle so I can get a clear bead of resin around that. All right, I got this sitting proud because I'll trim that off after. I made a little bouquet of tape around it with lifted edges, looks like a little like a daisy, and that is to keep the resin from spilling out over top of the epoxy primer that I put on this top deck. You can't put polyester on top of epoxy, but you can do it the other way around. So I mixed up a tiny batch here of polyester with a very small amount of silica in it, just so that it's not too runny. I did tape it on the underside to prevent it from dripping through, but it still could. And then I'll just start pouring it in here. So okay to pour right along this post because that'll all be trimmed off after. Give it a little wiggle, try to get any air bubbles out. Double check my tape below. Got the birds talking to us out here. Alright, that is probably plenty. I can't get any more in there. Keep wiggling it. See if I can get some more to run in. I'll leave this here and check back in a few minutes just to make sure that there's no pockets. Alright, this stuff is all cured now. I can remove this peel ply. Leaves me with a nice matte finish here. It's very solid. Now those bolts will never turn, so I can bolt that on from underneath inside of our mechanic room, or shop we call it. Now I'm going to bend this tube into place so I can start cutting my foam that goes from here up to here. Alright, so I measured my lengths. Now I just got to measure my angle. Now I'm going to cut myself a piece of foam out to be the outside. And then on the inside, like I did on the first one, I'm going to be putting a plank on each side of this, and then just some glass over top of the remainder. I'm going to get myself a straight line here. Here is 38 1/4. And there it is. Alright, this is the piece I just cut, and that looks like it's going to fit perfectly. So what I got to do now is just mark where this is going to be, because it's actually going to go through here is I'm just going to be putting a bit of a slope on this for extra support where it attaches to the bimini anyways. So that's why I sloped this water line going closer to the edge of the hardtop so that it catches most water. It's on the low spot of the bimini being close to the edge because of the slope. So that's going to come all the way through here at the top, and then I'm just going to be making a channel here. So I line that up where it's going to go. Using a big bolt. I just remembered what I did on the other side. Because I have to take so much material off of here, I'm going to lay a piece of glass down on here with some quick drying resin. Once I shape this, it's going to be so thin, this could snap in half if I'm not careful. So like I said, I'm just going to lay a piece of glass on the back side here to give it a bit of support. What I'm doing here, I sanded out an angle on each of those just so there's less gap I have to cover here with glass so that the tube fits inside here. And that's where the connector is here, so I look right down to the fiberglass, which is why I wanted to glass this on the back side first so it stays flat. Alright, I mixed up some thickened resin here with silica, and I'm going to apply it to both sides. This is the last of this batch I have because it's been crystallizing inside the container because of the heat here. It's so hot that I actually found that I have to keep the resin in the air conditioning because it's going bad before I can use it all. So no longer will I be buying 3 or 4 gallons at a time, or if I do, I have to keep them inside. And our boat's already got so much stuff in it, I really don't want to add too much. So I'm not making this super thick, I just don't want it to be too runny. Are a few little chunks in here, just little bits that are kind of like jelly. That's why I'm using this stuff up on this, because if there's a few little spots that take longer to cure, not too worried. This is just gluing these 2 panels together to make one. I'm sure I'll get enough adhesion. Like I said, it's not super thickened. And you want it to be able to soak in a little bit into this. Just as they want it to. lucky about mixing pretty much just the right amount. I guess you just get used to it over time. You can see in the background there, that's the security here at powerboats. They come around every so often with the GoPro and film everything that's here, just as an extra security precaution. There's so much security, there's nothing really to be insecure about. Alright, let's see if we can get these on here. Let's spread this in a little bit more. Still recycling this wood over and over and over again. As it gets smaller and smaller, by the time I'm done this, there'll be nothing but chopsticks left. And this is exactly what I want. I'm leaving this new piece just a little bit proud. It's super easy to sand after. I'll just sand it nice and flush. And now that's locked in there with the pipe in the middle. Everything's in place. And I'm just going to give this an hour or two to set. And I'm going to start glassing it in. So, next step here. I want to make some 4-inch arms. I just cut my 4-inch arms out and traced them to the angles here. And then to double it up, I'm just lining up two like this. Mark with a pencil, cut it with a knife. Easy peasy. Alright, so now I'm going to mix up some resin, same way I did on the last one. Add a little hardener. I want this stuff to go pretty quick because I don't want to be waiting a day in between each piece. So I'm eyeballing here what I think will be a quick set so I can work with it in the next hour. It's a lot of mixing because you got to do all these little stages. I realize you're supposed to be wearing gloves, but I'm not touching the cloth. I really only get resin on my hands when I'm trying to clean these tools and containers. It's the only time I seem to get it on me. Not terribly worried. It's only on me for a matter of seconds and I clean it off. It's better than going through 100 pair of gloves every couple days. And here I hold my breath because this stuff is not good for you. And I got a fan behind me, blowing any kind of excess dust away. Alright, this is perfect. It's liquidy but not drippy. Get that spread on these two pieces. I like to go just a little heavier in the middle and then clean up the edges. That way it pushes it out to the edges and then I get a real solid fill. Vice ones are great to get a clamp on there real quick, but they tend to make wet surfaces slide a bit out of place. That looks pretty good. Scrape out the excess. Easy to do now. It's hard to do with sander. Foam sands very easily, and the epoxy or the resin is hard. So you end up making divots in your resin if you try to do that after. Alright, we'll clean these tools up and let this dry. Alright, now that this is all joined together and tough, I'm gonna glue this joint together here as well as glue this panel to the top so that it stays put for glassing. So as simple as mixing up some thickened epoxy and using some boards clamped in place just to keep it where I want it to dry. Alright, this mixture I used some silica, a little bit of microballoon, as well as chop strand. So I'm gonna get some strength to it and not so heavy. Try to get a little bit more volume out of it and still have some strength. And I'm just gonna be caking this in here. Take off the peel ply yet. Move that down. Got a bunch of parrots flying around here. Don't see that every day back home. I like to use a lot of boxing tape because resin doesn't stick to it. So I just coat blocks with it and I don't have to worry about not being able to remove them after. Alright, that guy's locked in place. Keep working that in there. It pushes out to the other side. And the rest I saved for down here, just to help hold that pipe in place. This is why I sanded that fitting pretty good, so that this resin will stick to it. I'm going to wait for that to harden, and then I'm going to put one strip of glass over this just to close that void in. And yeah, I don't think that pipe is proud. We'll put a piece of wood on there when we put that cloth down just in case. But I'm pretty sure that's not proud, that's inside the cavity. So for now, we're good. We're going to lose daylight soon, so I'm going to clean this up and we'll check back in with you tomorrow. Alright, it's the next day. Got the clamps off of this and a quick sanding on it just to break the edges so it's not too much corner. I break the edges off on this one once this is glued in because I don't want to break the edges where these are going to join. Next up, I just set these clamps here so that this will get in here easily. I'll slide it into place like that and then just shimmy that clamp over a little bit and then let that harden up. With a couple side clamp on here, probably won't need one at the top. Alright, that's installed now. We're going to let that harden up, come back, and start laying on some glass. Alright, next up, cutting some panels here of cloth. This is the heaviest biaxial that they have. So it has crisscross on an angle of linear grains, and then it has the chop mat that is sewn right into it. So I just made out a pretty simple template out of an old tarp that they use for covering up boats, and cutting out some panels like this that will be glassed onto the beams. The boys at West Coast Fabricators are busy making the swim platform, which is almost ready now. Looking forward to that while I'm working on the hardtop. The boat's a mess. We are doing so many projects simultaneously. I'm just waiting for some glue to dry here. I got my sheets cut out. I'm going to start laminating one of these beams here.
Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the bell so you don't miss next episode. Stay tuned and see you next week.